Our Champions League quarterfinal predictions were nothing less than poetry in motion. We got 75% of our predictions absolutely correct. So welcome back to our annual Champions League semi-final predictions. Before I could predict on the semi-finals, I would really advise you to go through my quarterfinal video again, in which I absolutely 100% accurately predicted that if Real Madrid and Manchester City's game enters deep into extra time and penalties, there is only going to be one winner. And it was Real Madrid, remontada. It was done based on history and analysis. I was absolutely correct on PSG. PSG's triumph over this lackluster Barcelona team. And I was also correct on Bayern Munich beating Arsenal. Simply because Arsenal are serial chokers in big European nights. Having said that, I think as far as Manchester City are concerned, despite spending billions in the last 10 years or 15 years, they have underachieved in Europe. On countless occasions, they have lost against underdog teams, including Tottenham, Liverpool. This Real Madrid team is, by the way, not one of their greatest European teams, and yet they still managed to lose, despite controlling the game for decent 60% of the match. I mean, in both legs, they took leads on both occasions. However, they squandered it, and one way or another, Real Madrid, they always find their way back into Champions League. They just know the art. They just know the art that how to outmaneuver and outwit oppositions in longer scheme of things. And that is the reason it's very difficult to discount Real Madrid. They have history with them. Not only that, very few teams have beaten Real Madrid deeper into extra time or on penalty shootout. This was the first time Real Madrid entered into a penalty shootout contest in a knockout Champions League game after 8 years in San Siro, when they famously beat Atletico Madrid on penalties. And I can recall Juventus knocking Real Madrid out into extra time in round of 16 in 2005, when Marcelo Zelayetta's kick sealed the game in favor of Juventus. So that's a pedigree in Europe. These clubs, PSG, Manchester Cities, and I can name quite a few, Arsenal, they lack that resilience. They maybe because they are not really recognized as true European clubs. I mean, they haven't won many European trophies. Manchester City, certainly they are the defending Champions League winners, but look at the amount of money which they have spent. So one Champions League title doesn't justify the amount of money which they have spent. Yes, they're dominating in English domestic league. I fully agree with that. But again, I mean, all these billions were not spent just to win the domestic cups, domestic titles. These billions were spent to win Champions League season in and season out. So they are perennial underachievers. And Real Madrid, once again, under Ancelotti, they displayed their tenacity not to lose. Moving into the semi-finals, it's going to be a historic... By the way, before I start on semi-final, it was bitter disappointment to see Atletico Madrid, I would say, choking against Borussia Dortmund. And brilliant effort by Borussia Dortmund. Congratulations to them. I may not be their greatest fan, but they managed to outmaneuver Diego Simeone. And I think it's time for Diego Simeone to say goodbye to Atletico Madrid. He has been at the club for the past 15 years, and somehow they are developing this habit of losing critical European Champions League matches. I mean, Simeone has already lost 2 Champions League finals. He has been into quite a few quarterfinals and semi-finals, but one way or another, I mean, just like Arsenal, they managed to lose their way. By the way, it's not a disrespect to Barcelona, but I think PSG just found their extra gear in second leg, and I think it was still an achievement for Barcelona to reach this stage. Semi-finals are going to be historic, especially Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. These two teams, they're pretty familiar with each other. And in the last at least quarter of a century, they have faced each other on countless occasions. I can go back as far as 2000, actually, Champions League. I clearly remember, actually, Bayern Munich beating Real Madrid home and away in the second phase, in the second group stage of Champions League. However, ironically, both of them, they met again in the semi-final stages. At that time, Stefan Effenberg was their captain, Salihamidzic, and I think their coach was Otmar Hitzfeld. Same coach, Otmar Hitzfeld, was the one who delivered first ever Champions League title to Borussia Dortmund under dodgy circumstances, I would say, in 1997 Champions League final in Munich, where Christian Vieri's goal was disallowed in the 4th minute, and Juventus never recovered. Anyway, that is another story. So, but Bayern Munich actually lost against Real Madrid in 2000, despite dominating them in the group stages. It was Fernando Redondo's team under their famous coach, Vicente Del Bosque, who only took over Real Madrid actually just a few months ago, before that tie in the semi-finals of 2000 Champions League. And it was under Vicente Del Bosque, Spain famously won the World Cup in 2010. It was Fernando Hierro. Luis Figo was not part of Real Madrid at that time. Neither Zinedine Zidane was part of Real Madrid at that time. It was Roberto Carlos, González Raúl, Fernando Morientes. It was still a pretty formidable Real Madrid team, and they knocked Manchester United out actually. Who were the treble winners actually, defending champions of the Champions League, and they were the treble winners the season before that in 1999. So we see a bit of repeat in that. I mean, 24 years later, Real Madrid has again knocked out another Manchester team who also won a treble just a year ago. And famously, 24 years ago, Real Madrid did it away from home. So the home leg at Bernabeu was tie against Manchester United, 0-0. But in the away leg at Old Trafford, Roy Keane scored basically an own goal. And then there were two critical goals by González Raúl. So Real Madrid were leading 3-0. Manchester United hit back with goals by David Beckham, I believe, and Nistelrooy. I can't remember who was the second goal scorer. But Real Madrid triumphed 3-2. And Manchester United were stunned because that Manchester United team, they were as good as this Manchester City team. And they were very hard to beat, by the way, those days. But somehow... And that Real Madrid team was again not one of their greatest Champions League teams. You know, they managed to prevail. They met Bayern Munich in the semi-finals. They beat them, and then they beat Valencia in the final. And Real Madrid managed to win the Champions League for the second time in 2 years after winning against Juventus in 1998. So this time, this Bayern Munich team. Is it as good as the Bayern Munich team of the previous years? I really cannot comment on it because they have just lost the Bundesliga title after 12, 13 years. They have beaten Arsenal, but this Arsenal team, again, we know they lack pedigree in Europe. They have Harry Kane, and given the experience of Carlo Ancelotti, how Rudiger and Nacho, they defended for their lives today. You know, it literally felt like it was an old war, a classical war, you know, where Real Madrid, they are defending for their lives and they wanted to beat City, and you could see it in their eyes. Bayern Munich managed to beat Real Madrid in 2001. They met again, actually, famously in the semi-final, and it was a stronger Real Madrid team with the inclusion of Luis Figo. But there was a very odd goal by Giovanni Albert, I think from 40 yards at Bernabeu in 2001. Somehow it slipped from the hands of Iker Casillas, and Bayern Munich won 1-0 away from home. Home tie was, I think it was a draw, I can't remember, but what I do recall, it was a pretty comfortable victory in the end by Bayern Munich. However, they met again in the quarterfinals of 2002 Champions League. Home tie was won by Stefan Effenberg's Bayern Munich 2-1. They beat Real Madrid 2-1. Two late goals actually, but the moment Real Madrid faced Bayern Munich at Bernabeu, they thrashed them actually. It was a clear winner. Then they met again, in 2012 famous semi-final in which Kaká and Cristiano Ronaldo, I think they missed a penalty. And it was pretty odd and pretty rare to see Real Madrid coming to defeat at home in penalty shootout. It was Jose Mourinho's Real Madrid, and I think the match ended in like a draw, I think in both legs. And Bayern Munich were not expected to win that game, by the way. So that was one of those odd nights. However, afterwards, they met again, I think, in quite a few knockout Champions League matches. I can remember 2017. It was a pretty controversial game. I think there was a red card. I think Real Madrid managed to beat them comfortably in the extra time. But it was a pretty controversial game, and it was Ancelotti. Carlo Ancelotti, I think, was the coach of Bayern Munich at that time. And Zinedine Zidane was managing Real Madrid. And they have met, on some other occasions as well, in which Real Madrid has been triumphant. So the recent history, barring 2012 and 2001, it favors Real Madrid. This Real Madrid is more a pragmatic team. They do not have the firepower of Karim Benzema or Cristiano Ronaldo, they do not have like a super goal-scoring star like Kylian Mbappe. But I think, based on what I've seen today, and I think Bayern Munich actually struggled to beat Arsenal home and away. 1-0 tight win over Arsenal. It certainly gives me an indication that Real Madrid, they will find their way to beat Bayern Munich. And Ancelotti is a master of it. He's the most successful coach in the Champions League history. He has won so many Champions League titles. 2003 with AC Milan, 2007 with AC Milan, 2014 with Real Madrid, and 2022 with Real Madrid. So the guy knows how to do the job. Moving to the second semi-final, or the first semi-final, I don't know which team is playing first. It is PSG and Borussia Dortmund. PSG has never won a Champions League. Borussia Dortmund, they have won a Champions League in 1997, as I've said. They also reached a Champions League final in 2013. It was an all-German Champions League final which took place in London, in Wembley. So we don't know. We might have a repeat of that, where there might be two German clubs in the Champions League final again, and at Wembley in London. But I don't see it happening. Look, we cannot, you see, Borussia Dortmund are dark horses in Europe. Let's not forget about it. They reached the Champions League final in 2013 unexpectedly, by the way. They won the Champions League title in 1997 unexpectedly. If my memory serves me well, I think they reached semi-finals in 1998 Champions League season as well. They do have a knack, by the way. So don't be surprised that it will be a close affair. PSG, they have their own demons in Europe. I have seen PSG losing to weaker teams in Champions League knockout matches. Their only triumph in Champions League at semi-final stage was against Leipzig in 2020. And it was a single leg semi-final because it was COVID season, so obviously UEFA decided that there will be no two-legged ties. So winning a Champions League knockout tie in a single leg is very different. It's very different, by the way, playing two-legged tie. So yes, they have won one Champions League semi-final, but that was not like really a true test of their mettle and spirit, I haven't come across PSG really fighting for their lives and beating a strong, formidable team in a two-legged Champions League semi-final tie. So this is going to be a true test of their character. But Kylian Mbappe is a man of big occasions. It is a slightly more pragmatic PSG team. They don't have Messi and they don't have one of those, chokers who somehow managed to... No, I'm not saying that Lionel Messi was a choker. He was a great player, one of the greatest footballers of all time. But it's just that, the system didn't suit him. But this time, actually, I'm tipping it 51% in favor of PSG. Purely because of the brilliance of Kylian Mbappe. I think we saw him in a World Cup final. He just rose to the occasions in that 10 to 15 minute bracket and he scored a couple of goals. We saw it last night against Barcelona. So maybe, the attacking-minded Borussia Dortmund will be found out by Kylian Mbappe in that 10, 15, 20 minute spell. So, but again, it is a very tight affair. It is 51-49 in PSG's favor. And then PSG to play in their second Champions League final. They lost to Bayern Munich in 2020. Again, a very close match, which they lost to 1-0 to Bayern Munich. But that PSG lacked experience, at greatest European big nights, on big occasions. So I think they must have learned from that. A lot of team players who were part of that team are not part of this PSG, but DNA matters, So since PSG, they reached the Champions League final, they took that monkey off their hat. So they know it is a doable job, but again, it is 51-49. And especially Leverkusen's dark history in Europe, Borussia Dortmund's dark history in Europe, you can never rule them out. And it's going to be a very interesting semi-final. I'm really looking forward to it. But Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, it is a historical Champions League rivalry. These two teams, they have met on countless occasions. Really looking forward to it. Champions League final, it's going to be an interesting, juicy affair. Real Madrid, PSG. And, we'll see what will happen. When the final comes up. I think in the first week of June, it's too early to predict. But as we can see, the European gods, or the footballing stars, have started to favor Real Madrid. So 60-40 in favor of Real Madrid and 51% in favor of PSG. Looking forward to both legs, and I will see you just a week before in the Champions League final prediction. Have a great day.